All right, good evening. I'm showing 7 o'clock and it looks like everyone is here. Dr. Gibson, you don't have to have the screen share of the flag, do you?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Excellent. If everyone would please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the first thing I have this evening is, welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education on Monday, July 12th. And I believe we have a presentation, Dr. Gibson. Are you going to be leading that?
Yes, ma'am, I certainly will.
Thank you.
First, before I start sharing my screen, I would like to thank all of the many people who came out to our equity forums over the past week and participated. It's a topic of interest for a great many people, and we were very blessed to have people from every walk of life, from every position, and including a number of students, their parents. We had staff, we had community members, we had grandparents. It was a very robust discussion, and I greatly appreciate the people who turned out to have a discussion, not necessarily to impose their point of view on someone else or even to try to convince someone else, but simply to hear everyone's story so that they understood and we all grew together. So for that, I'm very, very grateful. And the information that I'm going to give you tonight, I want to let folks know all of this is on our website. This PowerPoint is on our website, and an FAQ that has questions that came about in the forum answered on there, and we will continue to post information to that as we get additional questions. So I simply wanted to share that. So right now, I want to start this slideshow. As I said, we had the equity forum. We had good turnout. It was particularly positive that we had a large number of students, quite frankly, who came to talk about their experience and their feelings on the programs and their experience as Jefferson County students. The first thing that we started with in the forum, and I will here, is we wanted people to understand the information that we used to base some of our decision making on when we look at equity programs and how equitable our outcomes are for students. The first thing that we showed them was 5 years worth of trend data for our English language arts program. And as we noted, there is very little variation on our English language arts program. It has been fairly successful by any standard. We are perennially in the top 3, top 5 in the state. And the last year for testing, we had the highest English SAT scores in the state. So our staff does an exemplary job with our ELA program and our balanced literacy program, which has been very effective. So when we look at our math trend data, one of the things that we wanted to point out was when we were reviewing data years ago, we noted that the performance of our students in mathematics did not match the performance of our students in English language arts. And we undertook a number of initiatives to begin to make some changes in this data. Now, as I hope you can see on your screen, the red bars on the far left are designated as does not meet standards by the West Virginia Department of Education, and the blue bars on the far right for each year are for exceed standards for students performing at the highest level. And as you can see, over time, our teachers have, again, worked really, really hard to reduce the percentage of students who do not meet the standard and increase the percentage of students who are exceeding standards and performing at the highest level. They've done that by really focusing on teaching students the ideas behind the math, working on higher order thinking, keeping math journals, really focusing on the thought process behind the math and not just memorizing formulas. And it has paid dividends. I mean, overall, as a school district, as you can see, we've had enormous gains from that. Now, what we then look at is, it's one thing to say that we're doing well as a system. As you know, the federal government requires that states and school systems break the data down by certain subgroups. So we go from looking at the overall to looking at the subgroups and saying, does everybody benefit equally? Do they have equal outcomes based on the programs that we have? So for English language arts, we do have some gaps between the performance of our Black or African American students and our white students. Those have stayed consistent within the framework, and they haven't, the subgroups haven't changed as much, meaning that there's still like a 2 percentage point variation in those. We haven't closed the gap with those, but no one has gained or lost ground. It's a fairly static program. What we then found is that, oh, okay, it jumped past a slide. Okay, I apologize. Let me stop sharing for a moment and make sure that I get it to, I'm so sorry. I don't know why that it's not. I apologize for just one moment, sorry. These were in a different order earlier. Okay, there we go. From the beginning.
Thank you for the demonstration of the real life issues our teachers have faced this past year.
Oh, not purposely. They are so much better than I. You have no idea. Or actually, many of you have an idea. Okay, so moving from the ELA trend data to the math subgroup trend data. And what we found with the math subgroups is that we had considerably more variation and considerably more of a gap than with others. One of the things, if you look at the data for Black or African American, early on in this journey, nearly 60% of those students scored at the lowest possible level of does not meet standards, and only 2% exceeded standards. So that was of significant concern. So as we noted, the district as a whole has made considerable gains. Now, those gains have accrued to all of our subgroups. We don't have any subgroups who failed to make gains. Our white subgroup and our low SES subgroup were similar, 13 and 14% reductions in failure rates, and 9% and 8% increases in exceeds standards. Our Black subgroup, actually, in terms of overall failure reduction rates, we reduced that by 24%. There was a significant reduction in the number of students who moved out of the lowest tier. However, we did not see the same substantial gains in the exceeds standards. We did lower the gap between low SES and Black from 22 percentage points to 12, and we lowered the gap between white and Black subgroups from 25 to 14. So while that's great news, we still have double-digit gaps in terms of the performance between those subgroups. I think also concerning is that at the very highest levels, which often are necessary for college admissions, for scholarships, for a number of engineering STEAM careers, we we have seen the gap widen because low SES and white students have made greater gains in that exceeds high-level math category than Black. So that gap is widening. So one of the things that we have heard from individuals is, well, does poverty explain those findings when you look at subgroups? So we then went, and what you see in front of you right now is an enrollment demographic comparison where we basically took students who were Black and all non-Black students and looked at their low SES status. So it is correct that a greater percentage of our Black students qualify for free and reduced lunch than of our white students. I mean, our non-Black students. So that encompasses every other group. So it also is true, if you look at our end numbers, that 509 out of our 8,400 plus students are Black. So it is about 6% of our population. So a small number of students, but of that number, 41.85% qualify for free and reduced lunch, whereas only 25% of the 25.4% of the non-Black students qualify. But when you look at the next chart, that's a comparison between Black students, low SES and not low SES, and non-Black students, low SES and non-low SES. And what you'll find is while there is certainly an effect of low SES status on that group, it's an effect on both groups, but it affects white students far less. There is a significant portion of that gap that's not accounted for through low SES. And in fact, in most of our programs, our low SES gains are nearly identical to those of our white students. So looking at that data, we then got the question of, well, is it because they're not getting the material? Are they not coming to school? So we looked at the attendance data, and this is this year's attendance data, but we went back to 2018, looked at the same data, and it is very consistent within less than a percentage point. Black students' attendance rate was 94.56%, and for white students, it was 95.45%. As is often the case, low SES was our lowest attendance group, and again, 93.22%. We have, and I'm not sure what our status is this year, but there have been years when we have had the best attendance rates in the state. Our families very much value education and send their kids. So looking at all of those things, we still have a responsibility to those subgroups of students for outcomes. So when we looked at the research and wanted to work on programs and actions that would give us equitable outcomes for those students, because it's not just about opportunity, everyone has the same chance, because a lot of our students come in with very different starting places and very different supports at home. So one of the things that we looked at was recruiting and retaining staff that are reflective of that subgroup population. There's a pretty well-known study that Johns Hopkins did that showed that Black students who had at least one Black teacher before the 3rd grade increased their college go rate by 13% and decreased their dropout rate by 29%. If they had 2 Black teachers, then by 3rd grade, it increased their college attendance rate by 32%. So it was a pretty dramatic effect. So we've worked really hard with our HBCUs and our HACUs to recruit and retain Black and Hispanic teachers. Culturally linguistic responsive teaching, which is just a very education-ese way of saying that kids learn best when, and we learn best actually, when you take something, if you're trying to teach them something new, take something they already know or something that they're really interested in and tie the new thing to it. And when you do that, kids learn better. So culturally, linguistically responsive teaching simply means find out for this subgroup of students, whatever they are, what their greatest interests are, what they already know, tie the new information into something of interest and consequence for them. And that's for any group. The last thing you'll see on there is developing and implementing instructional programs that target those populations, which, as you recognize, we attempted to do in a math intervention program. So this is probably a very good place to pause for a moment and point out that during a lot of one-to-one conversations with people and all of our forums, the basic concepts of this program, what it is attempting to do, and once folks have a clear idea of how it's implemented, are very supportive. So most of the I think conflict or frustration or fears about this program were based on the way we communicated it. And I, as the leader of the system, have to take responsibility for that, and I do. This program at its heart is, first of all, it is a supplementary program. It doesn't replace any math class that we already have. There is not a student in the school system who is going to come out of their regular math class to take this separate math. This is an additional program, sort of like Math 180, which is another supplemental math program that we have. However, the program teaches to the same West Virginia mathematics standards. Now, I've had some questions about Common Core. West Virginia does not utilize Common Core. West Virginia uses the West Virginia College and Career Readiness Standards. And the math that's taught in this intervention program is the same math that is in those standards. The difference is that it is taught using different examples. Essentially, they tie a lot of the math concepts back to different cultural references. Most of those cultural references, African American. So when I think one of the examples that we gave was the Pythagorean theorem, and talking about, yes, Pythagoras did develop this theory in Greece, but did you know that before then he traveled to Egypt and worked with these mathematicians? So I think it was particularly meaningful and effective for students who have that interest. It also has a lot of real world examples in terms of cryptocurrency, in terms of exploring careers for mathematics, and using different historical figures that children may or may not be familiar with to show what those are. So that type of program, any student can benefit from, and any student is welcome to benefit from. However, in our communication and our eagerness to make sure that that subgroup of families knew that this was intended to support their children in a very specific, thoughtful way, we inadvertently gave the message to other students that they thought perhaps that it wasn't for them. And for that, I apologize. So I wanted to give the board some of the suggestions that came out of the forum, and I want to put out this as the forum participant suggestions. It doesn't mean that we'll be able to take or do all of these, but we heard a lot about needing to extend this beyond the summer. Even had we done the full 4 weeks, it wouldn't have been long enough to get data on results. We got suggestions about identifying high-performing students to act as peer mentors. Now, the suggestion was that those be students who identify as a minority. However, we would never restrict that role. If anyone wants to be a peer mentor, more power to you. Kids learn really well from other kids. We also had a suggestion to train teachers just to put those tools in their toolbox, and they can pull them out whenever they want to or need to with any kid they think will benefit, which is intention, and not to replace anything that they're doing now, just to give them another tool in their toolbox. We also got a lot of feedback about communication and about clarity and visibility, and had some good conversations about the balance we always strike between parents who say we bombard them with information and they want us to be more mindful, and folks who say they want us to tell them everything every time on every channel. So we do own that we need to be better stewards of information and how we get that out to folks. So when we looked at what we could do to help correct some of our earlier missteps, one of those is to rename the program, and not to in any way disrespect any part of the population, but simply because the name itself led people to believe that they may not have been welcome if they weren't Black, or that Black students would be required to take it. Neither of those is accurate. So we're simply naming it the Culturally Responsive Math Intervention Program, which is exactly what it is, as boring as that may sound. We are also putting back out to the community electronically and flyers that they'll have an opportunity to join this program. We'll have the final 2 weeks of it during the summer experience. We're looking at clubs, rotations, after school links, different ways to incorporate this program and these techniques into the regular school year throughout the year. And I thought it was a great idea, and talked to the staff, and they also thought it was a great idea for us to expand the training that we do for teachers to students, to interested students, so that they could be stewards of their own learning and really empower them to take ownership of their learning and support them in moving forward. So again, I know that was kind of hopefully a really quick, and I thank again all of the folks who joined us for the forums. I wanted to give the board an update of where we are, and thank everybody for their support as we continue to work through serving these kids.
Well, thank you very much for putting it together smoothly, and for everybody that participated in it.
Can I make a few comments and questions? So I wanted to thank you for offering the forums, because it gave the public a chance to look at the data. And the good news is that Black students can and are learning math in Jefferson County schools. We don't want Black families to think otherwise, because the data shows that that's actually not what's happening. When I looked at the 2019 data, Black students, 24% proficient overall. And so then I looked more closely at which schools were contributing to that. And I found that one particular school is weighing down the numbers for the Black achievement. So for example, if you look at Washington High School, 30% of Black students are proficient in math, 35% of white students proficient in math. Black students have higher rate of proficiency than Hispanic students at Washington. However, if you look at Jefferson, 41% of white students proficient in math, only 8% are proficient in math. And that 8% has a heavy weight, because we're looking at we have only 247 Black students who took the test, and 3,412 white students who took the test. So the numbers at Washington, though it looks like white students are more proficient by 4% more scored proficient, that's not even statistically significant, because so few Black students compared to white. So it could be that just 2 Black students didn't meet proficiency, and it gave an average of 4% difference. but the numbers at Jefferson are so extreme. The difference between 8 and 41%. If we just remove Jefferson High School from this mix, the percentage for Black achievement, well, proficiency, and I know that your data, and I'll just finish that, it would increase at least more than the Hispanic students. In some cases, at the middle school or at the 3rd grade level, Black students performed better than Hispanics. One elementary school, Hispanic students did better than white students. So my overall, it's skewing the numbers. So the Black students are doing just as well overall, or at least proficient level, as any other race, if not more in some cases, when you account for the numbers of students actually taking the test. So I feel like, you know, racializing achievement is distracting from the overall true performance of the school system. We need to look at the true performance of the school system. We only have 36% of 11th graders who scored in the proficient category on the math test. That's 36% overall of all 11th graders. And I just feel that that's not, you know, that's not acceptable. And we really need to increase the overall achievement of all students. And I understand that the data was focused more on just that highest level exceeding, which that's important too. But students are making gains and they are learning across, you know, all the schools. And the Black families that I spoke with, some of them felt that, you know, they're being singled out. It's an implication that they don't do as well as other races, and they feel that it's not fair to compare. You know, and even the data that you showed, comparing Black students to all other races, you know, and to keep hearing that and keep seeing is not fair to them, because it's actually not the case. Like I said, they're doing just as well as their white counterparts at many schools. That's all.
I was glad to see that we also have a group of students that are Hispanic and Latino students that need to have additional instruction as well. And basically what we're doing is using multiple learning modalities that are different than the ones we traditionally used. And that's not something that happened yesterday. That's been going on for years. And as many different modalities we can teach teachers to use is a good thing, because therefore more students will learn well.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Dr. Gibson.
Yes, ma'am.
Next up, we have the Deputy Superintendent for Instructional Support update. And welcome, Mr. Banks.
Thank you very much. Good to see everyone. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update. It's certainly not an update of the time that I've spent in this position. I've been here a week, but what I'm going to give you an update on is summer school. We are about halfway through the 6 weeks, and I'm going to share some statistics with you about where we are with summer school so that you can see those. And hopefully my screen, there we go. So I'm going to go through this, and certainly as you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. That doesn't mean I'm going to be able to answer them. I'm learning a little bit about summer school each day as I have the opportunity to learn more in this job. So through the first 3 weeks, we have a total of 942 students, a wait list of 133. Of those 942, 641, about 70% of them are riding a bus, and about 85 students of those 942 are taking advantage of the child care. Along the side, you can see the student count by grade level, the daily attendance rate, which is about 60%. And if you look at that bar graph just below those numbers, you can see the attendance. Very typical. It starts out usually very high in summer school, and then it dips throughout the summer, depending on what families have going on at home. So you'll see that up through today, attendance is at 60% countywide. Next, as you go down, you'll see that the majority, not the majority, but many of the students that are attending this program are K through 3 students. That chart right there in the middle that you'll see, kindergarten 1, 2, and 3, it's on the left-hand side, 94, 110, 103, 103. So you'll see that the higher numbers tend to be at the lower grade levels for students attending the program. As you move down, you also see that the high schools have the highest number of participants, and I believe that that's because a large number of students are taking advantage of credit recovery. So that's why those bars that you see here on the student count by homeschool are higher there for the 2 high schools. As you scroll down for elementary, we'll see that Shepherdstown Elementary has the highest number of students from that particular school, and then TA Lowry. So Shepherdstown has 108 students and TA Lowry has 82. Further down, we get into transportation a little bit, and I mentioned that statistic earlier. Around 70% of the students are taking advantage of busing. I don't know who's getting a ride to or from. It's just that of the students enrolled, 70% of them taking advantage of the bus transportation. And then right below that, you'll see the child care graph, and a large percentage, that green number, indicates the number of students who are not taking advantage of child care at the locations. Finally, down at the bottom, you'll see the high school program, and Apex is an online program, and then of course, you know what live instruction is. So you'll see that a higher number of students are taking advantage of the online program as opposed to the live instruction, with 11 enrichment only. So I just wanted to give you that update. Again, this represents half of the time that students are going to be in summer school, a total of 6 weeks. The program is 6 weeks long, and we have been in the program for exactly 3 weeks. So again, like I said before, I'd be glad to answer any questions, and more than likely I won't know the answer, but I'd be glad to check into it and get back to you. Are there any questions about summer school?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, why is there a wait list? Is it a wait list for students to get into summer school? I mean, I thought we had so much funding available, the CARES Act, and I don't understand the wait list part. What is that for? Do you know?
Dave, I can help you here. Certainly, we do have a lot of funding. What we do not have is a sufficient number of staff to be able to deliver for all of those students who signed up. So we had folks who came on, either they registered after the deadline, or they were in a program that was full and unwilling to go to another place, or we simply didn't have room. So I will certainly note that with almost 950 students, the previous largest summer school program that we've had has been no more than between 150 and 200 students. And at the end of a pandemic year, for Alex White, our SOMO team instruction, to put together this robust summer program and get enough staffing for it was quite a heroic effort. So while I certainly would love to see every single child who wants a full-time summer camp and transportation and food we simply could not garner enough teaching staff who at the end of a pandemic year were ready to turn around and teach for another 6 weeks.
Well, how long are they on the wait list? And if these students that the attendance is so bad, 60%, is there a time when those students are said, you know, told you either come to the program or we'll give you a spot to somebody else? Does that happen?
I can certainly get that data from Dr. Eversole and Mr. White about how many students have failed to show and been removed.
Thank you.
I think that's awesome that you're offering childcare. That targets a group of students that we could not serve if we didn't provide that opportunity.
I'd also like to add that it's been difficult finding bus drivers, custodians, secretaries, not just teachers. It's been across the board, and you need those folks absolutely in place to make sure the summer school runs as it should.
With a huge thank you to all the folks who've stepped in and subbed when we needed them to serve as many students as we could. Kudos to them.
The other thing I wanted to mention, if there aren't any other questions, and I just happened to come across this today. So it's on the website, and it's a really cool story. There's a young lady from Wildwood Middle School. Her name is Grace Ott, and she took first place in the state prepared public speaking contest. She was outlining the differences between animal rights and animal welfare. And it's just a great story that's on the Jefferson County Schools website. And all the things that she went through starting back in February. Her teacher, Miss Fennell, her ELA teacher, and her FFA advisor, Miss Poole, helped her get ready for that. But that's quite an accomplishment, and I just want to say congratulations to her. If I had more time, I'd bring her here and have her talk to you guys tonight, but we just found out about that. I just found out about this morning. So congratulations to Grace, a student at Wildwood Middle School, an FFA member.
Mr. Banks, I just have one more question. It was hard for me to keep up with your PowerPoint, your presentation. Could you send that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate the update. Next, we have approval of minutes. And before we move on to that, I just want to confirm, Dr. Gibson, that you are taking minutes for this evening since Ms. Varner is absent. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I'm taking minutes for her, which I also want to put out, since I am taking the minutes. I know that there was a discussion at the previous board meeting regarding minutes. So I just want to be clear that the minutes are a record of the action taking and are not a transcript, nor will they be a transcript of the meeting. For those individuals who want to go back and see any of the discussion that led to any of the votes or any of the positions taken by folks, they can review the video, which we post typically within 24 hours of the meeting. I know that one of our board members stated that they wanted the minutes to function as a transcript because video could be spliced or pulled. And I actually want to point out and thank Mr. Jason Johnson, who is the man who does the videos for us, who's a 5-year employee and actually certified in cybersecurity and an exemplary employee, and I thank him for his integrity in this process and have full faith that he will continue to do the same job and ensure that anyone who wants to access the information has access to it. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will not put you on the spot and ask you if you were taking the minutes in shorthand the way Ms. Varner does.
No, that's like a foreign language. I don't know how to do that.
Exactly. All right. So is there a motion to approve the regular minutes from the board meeting held June 28th, 2021?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the minutes. Do I need to wait for the discussion or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend the minutes so that they reflect that I did call a point of order for the last session. I said that we shouldn't go into executive session because it's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So, and point of orders are to be listed in the minutes. And that's not listed. It only says that I voted no, but it doesn't say that I did call a point of order. Because we're not listing on the agenda what we're going into executive for. And again, that's according to the Open Meetings Act, we are required to do so. At least mention personnel or legal or something, but we don't list anything.
And certainly if the board so chooses to designate that as a point of order and amend, that is a choice of the board. However, we do have a legal training session scheduled for the board at which it will be clear that the current methodology for executive sessions is legal and valid. Despite what individual board members may believe to the contrary. So I will be looking forward to that training.
Are you suggesting that when a board member makes a point of order that it's not supposed to be listed in the minutes?
No, ma'am. I said that it is a vote of the board to determine what action they're going to take. I do not function as a board member.
That's the state code. That's the state code. It's supposed to be listed. When a board member makes a point of order or a motion, you have to list that. I don't know what, I've gotten my information from many legal sources. And so, we'll see what the board's lawyer has to say. But I mean, this is public knowledge, verifiable. I can send it to you, which came to me from the state.
Right now, what's before the board is a motion to amend, and that's a decision of the board for a point of order. I have no recommendation one way or the other. You're welcome to act as you see fit. You're elected board members.
Okay, is there anyone interested in seconding Dr. Joy's motion to amend the minutes? All right, not hearing a second. We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes from the meeting held June 28th, 2021. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ms. Ogden, I'm sorry, you're on mute. I couldn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed?
No.
All right, thank you. Moving on to citizens' comments. And Dr. Gibson, I apologize, I do not have the list of the citizens who signed up, if you wouldn't mind.
Not at all. Mr. Johnson has those and he will be moving them over individually. The first person that we have signed up is Mr. Paul Clark. I will denote for all of the participants. I will presume that you do not have in front of you the rules for public comment, which Mr. Johnson usually posts up. So simply to let folks know, will you be doing the timing?
I would be more than happy to do the timing.
Thank you, ma'am. So thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. Always one to come to the rescue in a moment of need. So for those who are coming in for public comment, please note that everyone who is on public comment submitted their request in advance. We asked again 10 minutes before the start of the meeting. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Speakers are prohibited from making negative or derogatory comments using a name or position by which an individual can be identified. Comments may not be threatening, profane, vulgar, or abusive, or the speaker will be required to cease his or her comments. Anyone who deviates will be called out of order by the chair and required to cease. It is not a question and answer period. individuals can come and express their views on any subject matter. They direct those to the Jefferson County Board of Education. The board will not respond to those comments. The purpose of a public comment forum is for them to hear on matters of interest to the public. So with all of those caveats thus said, our first speaker for the night is Mr. Paul Clark, and he will be followed by Ms. Karen Buck. Okay. So Mr. Johnson has searched the queue of attendees, and there is no Mr. Paul Clark listed. As we noted to everyone who contacted us to sign up, your screen name must match your sign-in. Mr. Johnson, I believe that the individual whose name is user has their hand raised. I think perhaps that individual may be Mr. Clark. And you can contact him in the chat to verify that. And if you could move Miss Karen Buck over, then she can complete her public comment while you are verifying if that is Mr. Clark. Okay, so similarly, say that you do not see Miss Buck. Miss Buck was able to join us for our forums, which I was deeply appreciative of. If she is out there, then please raise your hand and we will locate you. Next up, we have Miss Barbara Fuller. I believe that Jeffrey Fuller is Miss Barbara Fuller, so I'm going to promote her as a panelist while we work to confirm Mr. Clark and Miss Buck. Let's see. So okay, we do not have Miss Fuller in the chat any longer or on our screen. Not sure where folks are going. Jeffrey Fuller, is this Miss Barbara Fuller? I've turned on your microphone so that you can speak. I've also moved to promote you as a panelist, which you are not accepting, so I can't move you over against your will.
He's showing as a panelist, but he's showing as muted.
All right. So if this is Miss Barbara Fuller, I need you to unmute and complete your public comment. Okay. Okay, so the last individual that we have is Miss Jessica Bridges. And it appears that Miss Bridges is not here. So all of the folks who signed up for public comment received a notice that they were in public comment, and to either give me their screen name or to have their name as their screen name, and we would be happy to move them. And at this point, none of those individuals outside of user has either arrived. So,
Dr. Gibson, excuse me.
Yes,
Didn't we
sir.
have a Stephen McDonald as well?
Yes, sir. He indicated that he would be attending, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to speak. I told him that I would put him on, and if he chose to come, that I would place him in the queue. So,
Hi, can you hear me?
oh, hello. Is this Mr. Clark?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. I'm glad we were able to finally get you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think you're having a problem with the other folks too. I think you're muting them or whatever, but I just now got the pop-up that says, you know, that you gave me permission to join the meeting. So anyway, so what do you got, 3 minutes or
whatever
what is the
you
rule?
Mr. Clark, I'll go ahead and start the timer.
Okay, so one of my biggest things that I'm noticing here, apologize, I've got this phone on because I tried to call in. You guys are getting wrapped around the whole black versus white thing, and it's just a continuous theme, not only the presentation, but you know, a lot of the discussion here. And I really wish you wouldn't do that. I think that Donna Joy was on the sort of the right path when she was talking about the racialization, which is a word that's new to me, but I find it pretty descriptive of what's going on. You guys, all kids are the same, okay? I know everybody comes from different backgrounds. You know, I did too. I'm all over the place. I was poor, I was rich, I was poor. It doesn't matter. The teachers matter, the curriculum matters. That's what you should focus on. And the other part of this is, from what I've heard, I don't know how much money you guys are getting, whether it's from the federal government or what, but there's a lot better ways to use that money. You mentioned that that gentleman, Mr. Banks, came on, and you had issues even making the summer program work because of lack of folks. You know, let's hire some better people. If you're going to use that money, use it for what it's worth. I wouldn't accept it, but because there's a lot of government programs, you've got stuff like critical race theory tied to it. You've got all this other crap coming down that has no bearing on math, reading, writing, English, all of the normal things that every kid should be exposed to. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic. You've got a whole bucket list of races on there. It's ridiculous. A teacher should be able to teach to any human being, no matter what color. And it's getting ridiculous. And I don't know if you guys are forced to do that because of the Department of Education or the state or whatever, but it's got to stop. You're having this problem over in Loudoun County. It's creeping right over the mountain. Well, it's all over the country. Is this cultural freak show revolution that's going on, and it's affecting everybody learning. Our history, our culture, our heritage, our way of life, our entire society. And we're all supposed to be the same under God. There's no black, white, this or that. And if there is, then people ought to stamp on it. And that's your responsibility as board members, even in your little world of Jefferson County. And I would highly encourage you to get rid of these little dopey programs, put the money around the teachers, get good talent in here. That's where it's going to pay off. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Were there any other public comment speakers available? All right. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Are there any changes to the posted consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am. There are 2 changes to that agenda. One of those items was changed from a hire to a transfer. And another one was a withdrawal of a resignation. And both of those changes are redlined on there. I also want to address a point that was brought up during our previous board meeting, since we're at the HR consent agenda portion of this. We had a board member who publicly made an accusation that our human resources department was violating the law through a hiring process. And that statement was untrue, both in fact and in law, and all of our HR policies and the particular action that she spoke of are compliant with 18A. And I appreciate the fact that we all have strong feelings about matters, but I think we need to take care in ensuring that we have accurate information and that we are respectful of the employees who do their jobs and work very hard and are following the law and need to be given the due respect and due diligence for that. So.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the amendment to number 1 from appoint to change transfer, and the amendment to number 13 deleting the resignation?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Any discussion?
Yeah, I want to make a motion to pull number 29 from the agenda. That position was never approved by the board. It's also a violation of state code.
You're referring to the dean of students, to the attendance coordinator?
Yeah. Number 29, we didn't approve that. And it also, you can't go from attendance to, or director to attendance. That's something in the state code.
Okay. Is there anyone interested in amending the motion?
Yeah, I just did. I think.
I'm looking for a second.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't think you need it for the consent agenda. That's what I've been told. So, I mean, I know that's what you've been practicing, but apparently if a board member asks to pull something, since it's the consent agenda, if you don't agree to it, we have to go through each item individually. That's my understanding.
Okay, so right now we have a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the attendance coordinator, which I believe is required by state to have an attendance coordinator.
It is required by the state to have an attendance person. Their title at the state level is director locally. You don't have to utilize that title. And certainly our attorney, Laura Sutton, is able to speak on that matter. The rules that Dr. Joy is referring to under Robert's Rules of Order actually apply to what are called small boards, meaning if there were boards that were smaller than this functioning board, which this board does not use the specialized small board rules. So it's inaccurate that if a board member wants to pull something, it has to be done, and then you have to go through item by item. So.
Well, either way, we never approved this item and this position. And also it does say in state code, it's to be the director because that's a pay difference. We don't have a job description. You know, the board has not seen a job description for coordinator. It's not approved it. So we are not supposed to be, you know, hiring people until this position is approved.
So it appears that we may need to do a training on human resources law and protocol, and I am happy to arrange for the staff to do that.
Yeah, you can do that, but we still need to pull that from
Okay.
the agenda.
Right now, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the 2 amendments that were made by Dr. Gibson. And we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Opposed?
Me, opposed?
Thank you. All right, we have no unfinished business this evening. And for new business, we have request action on the naming of the Jefferson High School softball field.
Yes, ma'am. We will be moving over Mr. Bill Stewart to do that presentation. And I know that several members of the naming committee are here, along with Ms. Joyce White, operations that field naming falls under. So I'll turn it over to Ms. White.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Gibson. This evening, I would like to request that the board take action on the naming of the Jefferson High School softball field. The official name that's proposed is the Lawrence and Debbie Vickers Field. And prior to your vote, I do have Mr. Bill Stewart, who would just like to say a few words and give you a little brief background about the Vickers and the naming of the field.
Thank you for inviting me to the school board meeting. And it's always very, very exciting for an administrator, an athletic administrator, to honor volunteers. And one of the highest honors that you can bestow on a volunteer is naming something after them. Lawrence and Debbie Vickers basically built the softball field, maintained the softball field, and also had participated in work with the concession area. When I started researching softball field history and those types of things, everyone mentioned the Vickers. And in 2013, in the packet of information that you received, there was a letter to Susan Wall, who was the superintendent at that time, requesting the name of the field to be after the Vickers. With research supported by Joyce White, we did not find that letter ever made it to school board agendas or approval. When I brought this back up, this letter was very interesting to find. And we also had letters of support from former athletic directors John Brown, Jay Kirby, and the current head baseball coach, John Lowry Sr. We also received faculty senate approval. So we went through all the steps, and the request here is to name the field Lawrence and Debbie Vickers III Field. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. All right, so from what I understand, you're requesting action on the board's part tonight for the renaming of the field or the naming of the field. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So is there a motion to approve the naming of the Jefferson High School softball field, the Lawrence and Debbie Vickers III field?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any discussion? All in favor of naming the Jefferson High School softball field, the Lawrence and Debbie Vickers III field, say aye.
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 Oppose? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for joining us this evening.
I would also note that there are several members of the Vickers family who are on here as attendees and watching this broadcast, including people who put an enormous amount of time and effort into making this happen and making J-High softball successful, including some great coaches. That's a family business over there. And I would just like to say thank you so much to Vickers group, the whole clan out there. Really well done. Thank you for doing so much for our kids. It's appreciated. It's seen and appreciated.
All right.
Yes, thank you to them. Absolutely.
Next up, we have superintendent's comments. Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments for us this evening?
No, ma'am, I do not. Thank you.
All right. And then this evening, I believe we have an executive session. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. We have an executive session for legal advisement and for personnel.
Okay, so pursuant to West Virginia Code 6-9A-4, is there a motion to enter executive session to discuss pending litigation against Jefferson Utilities with the board's counsel, which is protected by attorney-client privilege, as well as personnel?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
I want to call a point of order as the public wasn't given any indication about this executive session in the agenda. It's supposed to be listed in the agenda. I mean, you've said it now, but technically it's supposed to be provided to the public.
Once again, we're currently following the guidelines that we have been given, and we are rechecking those guidelines, and that's all I have at this point. So there's a motion to go in executive session. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Me, opposed.
Okay. 8:07, we're gonna go into executive session. And Dr. Gibson, do we anticipate action this evening?
Possibly on the personnel action, ma'am.
Okay. So we will go into our executive session Zoom, and then we will come back to this when we're done, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you.